Parshat Noach is, of course, most famous for the story of the flood. But what most people don't remember, and indeed I did not remember until a colleague pointed it out, is that the whole earth is punished twice in this parsha. The first and most famous is, of course, the flood. But the second happens at the very end, which means that it sneaks in only if you read the entire portion. The second is a story we have all heard, but may not know well. It's the story of the Tower of Babel. Tucked between two long genealogies, the entire story takes only 9 verses to complete. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." So they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." Then God came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. God said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech." Thus, God dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they stopped building the city. Because of this, its name was called Babel, because there God made their language into babbling. And from there, God dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Now, there's something heartbreaking about this story. Mankind, recovering only a few generations after the flood, was working together on a common project. And what? God gets scared? Throughout Jewish history, commentators have had a lot to say about this portion, assigning motive for the builders from everything from idol worship to creating a lightning rod out of the tower. I want to highlight one tradition, which I think is particularly interesting. There is a story that being scattered across the earth was not actually the punishment from God, but instead was a result of the project of building the tower itself. At the beginning of the project, each person was given a task according to their abilities, and they immediately began doing them. In order to make a name for themselves, as the text tells us, each builder focused single-mindedly on their work, ignoring everything else. They were going to make the highest and tallest tower, and each worker thought that their part of it was going to be the most important. The work was long and hard and grueling, but the builders kept at it, ignoring their friends, ignoring their families, ignoring every other thing about the world in an effort to make their names great. "Someday, I will be finished with this, my life's work, and then I can be with my husband," they said. "Someday, I will be finished with this, my life's work, and then I can enjoy my friends and my children." They persevered through the work, though, and eventually the tower was finished. When the people of Earth looked up at the tower, it was indeed a commanding structure. It pierced the heavens, as they had intended, drawing the attention of God and the angels. The builders went back to their homes, ready to resume the lives which they'd put on hold for this great project, their magnum opus. But when they walked into their homes, they realized they had nothing in common with their spouses anymore. They realized that they no longer knew how to talk to their children who had grown up in their absence. Terrified, the builders fled their homes, once familiar but now so strange, and they ran to their friends who were all experiencing the same thing. But even their friends were now no longer their friends. For decades, they each had worked alone, and single-mindedly. They had lost the ability to even speak the same language as their fellow builders. The bricklayer only knew how to speak of bricks. The carpenter only knew the workings of wood. And nobody knew any more how to talk to another human being. They had become their jobs, so diverse but so isolated that they lost their common language. Confused and lonely, the builders dispersed to all the corners of the earth, searching for companionship, searching for someone who could speak to them as humans. The story of the Tower of Babel is even more stark if we consider it next to the other major building project in the Torah, that of the building of the Mishkan, the home for the Ark of the Covenant in the desert. Unlike the Tower of Babel, the project of building the Mishkan took the mixed multitude of Hebrew slaves fleeing Egypt and united them under a common goal. This project also gave each group a job according to their ability, and Oholiab and Bezalel were assigned charge of the construction sites and the plans. The people worked day and night to complete their assigned projects. Men, women, children, priests, Levites, and all the rest. When they were finished, Moses took each individual piece, as if it was an offering from the artisan, and placed it before God. After all the pieces were approved, the people assembled the Mishkan together, consecrated it to God together, and placed the ark within it. When they needed to move it, they each disassembled their piece and carried it through the desert until they reached the next camp. Each person had their job as an essential part of the whole picture. But the Mishkan became a uniting force among the people. So what on earth was the difference between the Tower of Babel and the Mishkan? Both were major construction projects. Both were built by the hands of humankind. Both needed intense focus from builders and artisans to complete the structure. Was it the fact that the tower pierced the heavens and the Mishkan did not? Was God jealous of the beautiful city and the unlimited potential of human creation? Is God really that petty? I tend to think that no, God is not that petty. I think that God recognized one distinct difference between the building of the Tower of Babel and the building of the Mishkan in the desert. We read that difference in today's portion, verse 4. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with a top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. The Tower of Babel was constructed as a glorification of humankind and human effort, a great, braggingly huge structure showing off human craft and human cunning. In contrast, the building of the Mishkan was the project of a community united around honor of the sacred. Whether you believe that God literally dwelt within the Ark of the Covenant, or whether you believe it was only a symbolic indicator of God's presence in the middle of the camp, it remains that a disparate group of Hebrew tribes constructed a place together for their one uniting God. And in doing so, they became a nation. They became Israelites. The builders of the Mishkan did not seek to glorify themselves through their project. They completed a project together to glorify God and show God deserving gratitude for all that had been done for them. We can imagine that were we to be in the desert at their initial project meeting, we would not have heard what those at Babel said, "Come, let us make a name for ourselves." Instead, we would have heard, "Come, let us make this Mishkan so that we are worthy of the name God gives us." Through the project of building the Mishkan, the Israelites honored God through the most vital of human work, building community. We are the descendants of both the people scattered from the Tower of Babel and the people who constructed the Mishkan. We are workers and artisans. We create things every day with our own hands. This portion, this cautionary tale of the Tower of Babel, asks us, why do we create? Do we do it for our own glory, selfishly trying to become the best at our thing? Or do we do it instead to create community and to honor God? We must do it together, full of gratitude for our God-given abilities and the community which surrounds us. Let us be a community of Israelites, worthy of that name that God bestowed upon us, and in doing so, merit the honor of carrying God within our community always. Shabbat Shalom.